Okay, speaking of a great story, I got to hear this one from you. Take us through like the production of the final moments of Oregon, Ohio State in Autzen. We all have watched it 100 times. I watched it with Dylan Gabriel, like in a film room, in advance of the Big Ten title game. But how are you navigating it as a color analyst, producer in your ear, talk back, fully alive, got know who you're looking at, 12 men on the field? Can you take us through the dynamics of the last 30 seconds of that ball game?
Yeah, well, first of all, I kind of find myself in those situations kind of in the moment. Like I mean, because look, as a player, as a quarterback, you love those situations, right? Games on the line, 2 minute drive. You dream of that. So as a broadcaster, I kind of put that same hat on at that point, and I'm thinking scenarios. I'm thinking, try to stay one play ahead, one step ahead. What has to happen next? Uh, and really, a good producer is not going to be overly talking to you in that situation. He's going to listen to you. He's going to listen to us and follow us in that. Um, the 12 men on the field, it was weird because I would have never, ever guessed that it was done intentionally, like when it was happening in real time. The only thing that stood out to me, I did notice this, was that we caught a camera shot of Lanning talking to Tosh right afterwards, and he wasn't like yelling at him. Like there was not this anger, like, what are we doing? How did we have, so that, and then we got off of it and we were on to the next play, so, um, and everybody celebrated that. But to me, looking back on it, still incredibly risky. It was one of those deals where, yeah, it worked out and it was surprising and looked like a brilliant move. Um, and then Will Howard just an extra clutch, just an extra double clutch. I mean, he knew how much time. I mean, he was a smart guy. He's a veteran guy. When he took off running, he knew it was close, but it was that extra hitch before he took off, I think that lost him the time and made the difference in the ball game. But I mean, again, there's a great story of overcoming adversity, right? Biggest game of the regular season, they lose, he makes an error. Okay, he has to live with that. He has to earn it, to own it, and then he comes back and plays lights out all the way through the playoffs and great in the championship game, and they win the national championship. So tremendous story for him too.
Yeah, it was beautiful. After the Rose Bowl, we were on the field together, and he said that was laying in the indoor facility when they landed from Eugene and just spent there by himself. You can imagine that moment as a former quarterback yourself. And I love the detail on the broadcast. I'm the same way. 2 minute drill, like I'm playing quarterback.
Right,
Like let's
right,
predict, let's go. Like you don't want to hear anything. You're
yeah,
telling them what replay and how to navigate it. So
yeah. Well,
that's really cool insight.
here's a part of why I'm like this, and I don't know if you ever had any dealings with him or not, but and I only played for him for 1 year, but for 1 year when I was in Kansas City, we had Homer Smith as our offensive coordinator, and then he was only 1 year in the NFL, and he went back to college. He was at UCLA for a long time. He was at Alabama, and was an interesting guy. I mean, brilliant mind, but kind of like a nutty professor. He would not sure which floor to get off on the elevator. But I mean, he could break down everything, and he loved and even wrote books on clock management. So we would go to stay at a hotel on Saturday night on the road or at home, and when we check in the hotel, the quarterbacks, he'd be sitting in the lobby waiting for us. And he had this little football field, like magnetic football field with little figures, little discs. And we would each have to go through a 2 minute scenario, before we went to bed, before we went to our rooms. And he would give, we would do it every day, but we would do it, on Friday night at the hotel or Saturday night at the hotel. And he'd give you a different scenario. Each guy had a different scenario, different time, number of timeouts. Do you need a field goal? Do you need a touchdown? End of the half, end of the game. And, that just really stuck with me. I mean, everybody practices 2 minute, right? And everybody stresses it as important. But you well as I do, I've seen plenty of games where there is horrible clock management. And whether it's on the sideline or on the field, they mismanage the situation horribly. And I just think it's something that you have to really, really hone in on and practice and work and be detailed about if you want to be good.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts, and I bet you're the same, of like production meetings. David Shaw comes to mind, who's now with the Detroit Lions, but of asking coaches, how do you navigate the clock once you get mid third quarter at the end of the game? Like, do you care? Are you counting possessions? And I can remember Stanford is always like the one that's always illustrated, because I think it would drive fans crazy sometimes of why are they punting the ball? Why did they run it again on 3rd and 8? And in his mind, and even Chip was the same at certain stops, where it was like, we want to make sure we're doing the math in real time. So yeah, 2 minute is one thing, but really at the 11-minute mark, how many possessions, what are we counting, time and score, who's playing well. And I think that part of the game is just fascinating, because I do think
Yeah.
styles change pending the score and even the time of the season now with this new expanded playoff about what's at stake.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think it is fascinating. And, I mean, analytics has obviously become a lot more prevalent in the game. And some coaches are all in on it, like Lane Kiffin is all in on it, even though there's still some situations where he'll make a decision with his gut. But some coaches rely really heavily on it. Other coaches, I remember Nick Saban, he didn't want anything to do with it. I mean, he just didn't see the value of it. But and hard to argue with him, right? And his gut instincts on things. So, but I think part of that is understanding time, possessions, and what do the analytics, what does the data lead us to in that.